Thank you. I know this commission focuses on the national security aspects and foreign policy aspects of our trade relationship, but since Amber Mullen has commented that the greatest national security threat we face is the U.S. budget deficit, it seems clear that the economic health of our country and our national security are so intertwined that to say, well, you're not concerned about the economic aspects, just the national security aspects, would be a non sequitur. Second, it's just a matter of economic theory. We're running a huge trade deficit, and there are only two explanations. One is that the American workforce is underskilled, overpaid, and lazy. The other is that the American government, Wall Street, and the talking classes of the United States have acted in their own interest and betrayed the American middle class. I'll leave it to you which of those two explanations better explains our situation. We are going to need radical change, and I'll describe my bill at the end and its purposes. And finally, I'd like to commend many on the Commission for standing up to the condescension that is one of the chief tools of those who benefit from the present system. As if those of us who think there's something the matter with our trade relationship didn't take Economics 101. We did, and all the economic theory would say that the trade deficit that we have with China is impossible. So those who benefit from that or want to defend it simply say, it's such a beautiful theory, you just have to ignore the facts. And that is what we do. Every time we point to an enormous and growing trade deficit, we're told, but it's such a beautiful theory. The reason the theory breaks down is because the theory assumes that every other country is just like us. What is America? What is our economic system? It is a system of private actors acting in their own self-interest, constrained only by published laws and regulations. If you eliminate the textile quota from a particular country, more textiles come in from that country. Why? Because private actors find it in their own interest, and private actors are not constrained except by written laws and regulations. Culture does not constrain them. Making a buck, whether it be by importing, exporting, whatever, is the American way. And so we assume that Adam Smith lives by the billions in China. This is not true. So we negotiate a change in our written laws and regulations in return for, at most, a change in their written laws and regulations, as if well-written laws and regulations are the only constraint on private actors in the United States, so that must be true in China as well. Put yourself in the following position. Let's say I believe in American jobs, and I call the local Toyota dealer in my district, and I say, Jack, stop selling those Toyotas. Don't even start selling Fords, and don't even sell the Fords that are made abroad, just the ones here. The only question would be whether he would laugh at me or hold a press conference saying, idiot congressman tries to influence private sector enterprise. Now imagine I'm not a congressman, I'm a commissar in Shanghai. And I call a business and I say, look, I know we have to import these goods, but you should buy the German goods, not the American goods, because the Germans insist that we have a balanced trade relationship with them. So we got to buy some of their stuff if we're going to sell to Germany. And the Americans are, well, idiots. So, and you make that call as a commissar. Do you think that the response is, but the American goods are better or cheaper? The conversation might go something like this. Mr. Wynn, if that's his name, we're sure you'd make the right decision because I see your resume here and you're very well educated. I'd hate to think you need re-education. Now, the fact is such pressure isn't really necessary because the major economic actors in China are partially owned or controlled by the Chinese government anyway. And so when an American airline buys planes, they'll buy from the United States, they'll buy from Europe, but no American airline has said, well, we'll buy the Airbus only if you build a factory in Alabama. Yet what happens when Boeing tries to sell to China? It's not an independent actor making a decision as to what is in the economic interest of its private airline. It is a national planning apparatus. And so if we enter the world in which our only shield is written laws and regulations, and we enter into treaties to change them, and we play against a society in which government control of private enterprise, the ability to intimidate, a culture of governmental control are all available in addition to written laws and regulations, we should not be surprised at the result, but nothing prevents a man from understanding something like that his livelihood depends on not understanding it. I forget who said that, but they were quite wise. And so we are constantly repeated the old economic theory, and the economic theory is based on everybody being Adam Smith and every society being one in which there are free economic actors. As to the some of the current issues that are before us and how we got here, we made a blunder in giving most favored nation status to China. We changed our written laws and regulations in return for them perhaps changing theirs. That was H.R. 4444. In the Chinese tradition, that 4444 connotes extreme bad luck. Chinese are telling us something. Maybe we're telling ourselves something. Our trade deficit exploded from $84 billion to $273 billion during the recession. It dropped a little bit. And every time we run a trade deficit with China, the response is, oh, our trade deals are just wonderful. It's because America's running a budget surplus or a budget deficit. Well, last year we had the biggest budget deficit in our history. Just a decade or so ago, we ran a very large budget surplus, and the trade deficit grows and grows and grows. It grows in the sunshine, it grows in the shade. But every effort is made to blame America for what is Chinese mercantilist policies, and you should blame America because we're getting away with it. They're doing a good job of protecting their people. They have done an outstanding job of taking a very poor population and raising its standard of living. As to the size of our exports, they only equal 1.6% of China's GDP, and this is actually shrinking. So there is no overall Chinese effort to reduce the trade deficit. They are importing less from us as a percentage of GDP than they did before. Economic Policy Institute study on unfair China trade estimates that between 2001 and 2008, 2.4 million American jobs were lost or displaced. We are told that our exports are growing more quickly than our imports, which just shows that the devil has a calculator. The fact is, no, as a percentage, our imports are growing less quickly than our exports, but in dollar amounts. So usually if one thing grows by 50 billion, something else grows by 100 billion, the 100 billion is usually thought to be the larger number. I mean, this is like saying that I increased my follicle count more than anyone else in the room. Yeah, but from what base? Okay, and of course, individual American companies are, even if they resent the situation, they quickly adjust to it. They're not public policy actors. They say, well, in a fair world, we'd export $10 billion worth of goods to China, and we make them in the United States. But it's an unfair world, so we're only going to sell $4 billion worth of goods to China, and we're going to have to enter a co-production agreement to do it. But that's $4 billion that we wouldn't have otherwise. Okay. So American businesses, if anything, send their lobbyists here to Washington to show the Chinese how much they deserve not to be completely screwed when they go to China because they're here on the Hill lobbying for the present system. The latest outrage is the Indigenous innovation policy. And here, the direction has gone out from Beijing. Buy Chinese goods, especially for state and local governments, but also for other companies as well. Now the Chinese are being urged to unring the bell. Send out a memo saying, well, we didn't really, the Americans have asked us to tell you that we really don't think you should not buy their goods. You can't unring the bell. The fact is, the word is out. Discriminate against imports, particularly American imports, in all state and local or provincial and local government purchases. Now, there are, obviously we should do something about the currency manipulation. The one other comment I'd want to make here is that this is not, the current system is not just insanity for the United States, it is insanity for China. A developing country with a U.S. bond fetish. Every year they make a lot of stuff, and what do they get for it? More U.S. bonds. This is a country where people aren't getting enough protein if they're getting enough food. Do they import American chickens? No, they import American bonds. There is a codependency here that is bad for both countries. You would think that China would import 100 million chickens every week from us on the theory that if the government wants to be popular, there is a proven political slogan, a chicken in every pot. But instead, they just buy another $100 million worth of our bonds. Developing poor countries investing their capital in America rather than using that money to raise the standard of living, using that money to import goods so as to control inflation in China. It's a perverse relationship from both sides. Although I can't say that my bill is done to correct the perversity and the harmful effects of it on China. Yes, we need to deal with the currency manipulation. Yes, we need to deal with the indigenous innovation. Yes, we need to deal with the copyright infringement and the piracy. But ultimately, these are just nibbling around the edges. We need a balanced trade relationship with China. And you cannot get a balanced trade relationship with a country that has a managed economy just by using Adam Smith advice for how to deal with countries that have free economies. What you need instead is an agreement to have balanced trade. My bill would cut off MFN for China 6 months after enactment, not for the purpose of cutting off, of ending all trade or taking it back to a few $1 billion a year in each direction, but rather for the purpose of causing a crisis and entering into an agreement with China that is guaranteed to reach balanced trade within 4 years. One way to do that is Warren Buffett's long ago put forward policy, and it's similar to cap and trade, and I don't want to get involved in that argument because it has nothing to do with carbon atoms or higher energy costs or alleged higher energy costs for Americans. What it is you export something to China, you get a chit. You want to import something from China, you need a chit. You do that, you can determine how large the trade deficit will be. You could say you export to China, you get 1.2 chits, and you import from a dollar's worth of goods from China, you only need 1 chit, and then you're going to have it being unbalanced to the ratio of 1 to 1.2. Well, that might be good for a year or so, and then you can work your way to 1.1. Economic theory would say that we should eventually repay our debt to China. Another point I want to make is that there are those who think that America should cower in fear because China is our banker. These are people who start with their own experience. If the bank has a mortgage on your home and you don't pay them, then the sheriff will come, throw you out of your home, And so you ought to fear your banker. Okay. Putting aside our invasion of Haiti in roughly 1905 and seizing their customs houses in order to make sure they pay their debts, since about then, sovereign countries are operating as if there's no sheriff. Your bank would have to be nice to you to get you to pay your mortgage payment if we had a rule that they could never foreclose against your house. In international affairs, it is the debtor, not the borrower, who has the ultimate power. So I've gone on long enough. I look forward to whatever questions you might have, and I thank you for your work on this important issue.